Right. Dave, thank you so much for joining us here in San Diego at our 2017 Innovations in Recovery Conference. And I just wanted to start off just by welcoming you and then starting the conversation around the refuge recovery and what your relationship is with refuge recovery.
Well, it's a big question. I've been with refuge recovery since the beginning, so it's going on for many, many years now. The book came out in 2014, so that's a good timeline. And since then, we've seen meetings get created, meetings started all over the country. We're at like 260 meetings now in 20-something states, 10 or 11 countries. And so it's really just this way for people to embrace the refuge recovery program, but being able to start peer-led meetings in places where they don't have access to a Buddhist teacher, a Buddhist community. So it's really a peer-led community. And I've been the executive director for the nonprofit and kind of spearheading some of that stuff. And it's mostly just been a lot of fun seeing people get access to these practices and this kind of approach to addiction recovery.
I was trying to think back. I think you and I met probably 4 years ago or 5 years ago in Nashville, Tennessee. And when you mentioned about the growth of refuge recovery, it really is a platform where people all over the world can identify, get in touch, and start leading the refuge program.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, because it's peer-led, it's not a top-down type of situation. And that we find that oftentimes people who are in long-term recovery, who have been going to different types of meetings, 12-step meetings for years, are starting meetings. So we have this great combination of people who've been in recovery for a long, long time, embracing refuge recovery and either adding it or doing it as an alternative, which also opens the doors for people who are brand new, who are coming in off the streets, who are coming in out of treatment. So it's a really great mixed bag of people getting clean today and people who have been in recovery for a long time, for 20, 30 years.
We were talking earlier and thinking about your personal story. I was really struck about how you got in contact with Noah, through his first book, Dharma Punks. And I think about how far Dharma Punks, kicking off in this refuge movement, how we have so many different options now when it comes to 12-step programs. And I really think that you guys were such leaders in opening up the way that we think about the 12-step movement, not as just one program, but really as a community.
Yeah. Well, refuge is not symptom-based. So refuge recovery is not about drinking or alcohol or sex or gambling. It's about addiction. So the symptomology of that, whatever object that you create an addiction around, is essentially irrelevant. It's the fact that you have some internal craving or some internal process where you're needing to reach out to some sort of substance or some sort of behavior to get some type of relief. So we're hitting a wide range of addictive behaviors, which, as we know, are pretty plentiful in the world. The world is like a buffet for addiction behaviors. And so when we get into these 12-step different, there's drugs and there's alcohol and there's sex and there's gambling, we have a program that hits all of those, which I think a lot of people are finding to be helpful.
What do you think about the time? I mean, I think you were reminding me that Dharma Punks came out in the early 2000s. What do you think about in these intervening, 12, 14, 15 years from a society standpoint? Where do you think that refuge has come from, and where is refuge going?
I don't know where it's going, and I can't wait to find out. It's a big mystery to all of us. But, essentially, Noah Levine was the first Buddhist teacher in America who was sort of, I would say, countercultural. He was, a teenage drug addict and a criminal and got locked up and ended up being in recovery. And his whole story, that he made Buddhist practice and mindfulness, he made an appetite for people who normally would not have been introduced to those practices. So he hit a huge population just because of who he was and what he represented. So you have a bunch of punk rock kids who have been dissatisfied by life finding it. You have all these people who are in recovery or had problems with addiction finding it. So he hit a demographic that I think was really important. And because he's teaching Buddhism, which is essentially about overcoming suffering, he also hit a demographic where there was a lot of suffering. And so that message, I think, landed well for a lot of people.
I think one thing that I have identified in working with you guys over the years is the authenticity. And I also appreciate the way that you guys approach, the lack of judgment. And I think that that's why you guys are really being so successful all around the country, is that people really do identify with people like you and with Noah, but it's also this peer-led community. I know when I've been to some meetings in Nashville, when you weren't there. There's always another 2 or 3 people that I identify with, and I think that's what keeps building it.
Yeah. Well, I think authenticity is a little bit of a buzzword now, and people want to be authentic, but they really have a hard time doing it. And there's some other ingredients that need to be in play. And the first one I think is self-honesty, is that people need to become honest with themselves about the struggles in their life. And if you're able to do that, then you're able to be more vulnerable and be able to be honest and open and share with other people about the struggles in your life. And that kind of prompts you into this experience of being authentic. And of course, having a recovery background and working steps and the kind of intention around being or having self-disclosure, I think kind of prompts all of that. And my experience with authenticity is that it's very contagious. That if you sit in a room full of people and 2 or 3 people kind of get real about the struggle, that all of a sudden everybody wants to be like, can I be next? People find that there's a contagiousness to that. And I think that's really why the recovery movement has been so helpful across the board, is that people like that. And yeah.
Talk a little bit about your ebook that you published, and then if you wanted to share anything about how people can get a copy of that.
Yeah, I did an ebook a couple years ago called Ethical Mindfulness. And I kind of came at it from this perspective of having taught secular mindfulness for many, many years in mental health agencies and in prisons and youth detention places, and seeing that there were some limitations in secular mindfulness because there was this lack of Buddhist ethics or Buddhist philosophy. And so I used the word ethical because in Buddhism, we try to identify behaviors that don't cause harm. So if you mix ethical mindfulness, you get this practice of mindfulness that encourages loving kindness, that encourages compassion and forgiveness and appreciation and equanimity. So it was my kind of attempt to mix the 2 worlds of Buddhist mindfulness and secular mindfulness and try to find some common ground between the 2. And I felt like it was pretty good. I don't feel like I'm done with the project, but ethical mindfulness, you can Google it, you can get it in a Kindle download. I think it's really quite cheap and affordable, and so that was.
Well, you're still a young man, so I'm expecting that we're going to have many more books that we'll be able to download and read from you.
We'll see. Writing a book is hard work. Ever since I had to attempt writing a book, I'm very less judgmental about books in general, because it's easy to read a book and say it wasn't very good, but sit down and try to write one.
That's a great point, Dave. Now, if people want to get in touch with you or with Noah or with Refuge, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Well, the best way to get in touch with Refuge Recovery is to just go to refugerecovery.org, and that brings you to the nonprofit website, and there's a picture of the country and meetings you can click on. And if you're interested in Refuge Recovery Centers for professional treatment, there's also a link there, or you can check out refugerecoverycenters.com. I just launched a website called rebelsaintdharma.com, which has some resources on there, ways to get in touch with me, my teaching schedule's on there, and people who are interested in working with me on an individual basis can find me there as well.
Great. Well, Dave, we're honored to have you in San Diego, keynoting our conference and closing us out tomorrow. And I just appreciate your personal efforts on behalf of everybody that's suffering with addiction in this country.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.